At the end of last year, Patreon, a popular crowdfunding platform for internet creators, changed their terms of services, prohibiting the publication of any adult content that would not meet the criteria for consensual sex preached in mandatory freshman seminars. An amendment that seems to stand in direct contradiction of Patreon's own philosophy. This is not about building an arbitrary framework of right or wrong. It's about making Patreon a place where diverse creators and their communities feel excited, supported, and happy to exist, while still allowing for different, and sometimes even conflicting, points of view. And unexpected, considering Patreon's historic support of the content in question. In an official email sent out to adult content creators just months before the changes to TOS, Patreon celebrated its victory with Braintree, a subsidiary of PayPal, allowing recurring donations for adult content to be processed through PayPal. A huge victory for artists who have been denied a platform to market artwork deemed too risky for advertisers. As a result of these changes, artists who have legally made a living on Patreon pledges are at risk of being deplatformed. To meet the new regulations imposed on adult content, concerned artists have resorted to negotiating acceptable measurements for their characters. Seriously, somebody at Patreon is being paid to stipulate the appropriate thickness of cartoon poon. What? While I acknowledge Patreon's right to deny its platform to artists who create deemably irredeemable content, and I recognize that Patreon has become an international employer for creatives, when obscenity laws remain inconsistent country to country. To me, this policy seems a tad shallow. Patreon is a platform for internet creators, people who have to venture off the beaten path to make a sustainable career doing what they love, many of whom place a high priority on creative liberty because they are being paid by their fans, not investors with personal agendas that promote groupthink, and probably frown on someone drawing anime titties for a living. When Patreon draws lines defining how the female form should be represented in illustrations, they are making the statement clear that their public image comes before their own creators. Patreon, a platform which claims that it aims to foster an environment in which creators feel excited, supported, and happy to exist, and which owes much of its success to outsider art communities like furry and hentai, has sold out its roots to appear more investor-friendly. These changes to Patreon's TOS foretell a difficult future for adult content creators. Some artists have switched over to Patreon, an alternative payment service popular amongst porn stars and alt-right personalities. But such a platform has yet been proven to be stable long-term, and even the site's highest paid creators make tens of thousands less than those on Patreon. Others have turned to social media to spread awareness among their communities and gather digital signatures for petitions. Few are willing to publicly come to the defense of immoral speech. Those who are bold enough to contest when our artistic freedoms have been compromised are met with hatred and even death threats, which I had the honor of experiencing firsthand after my fiancé tweeted his concerns with the policy changes at Patreon. We draw value from art, pornographic or not, through our own personal exposure. We don't need to be told what a work of art is or how it should make us feel, or especially whether it's right or wrong. It's blasphemy that a society priding itself on individualism is so quick to denounce the expressive freedoms of others, without even making an attempt to understand them. And to what end? Are people really so bored as to waste hours of their lives crucifying others when there is absolutely no evidence that consuming such explicit illustrations is even harmful in the first place? Guess so. Anyway, now that you've received your daily dose of vitamin woke, now is the perfect opportunity to discuss one of my favorite anime films, which not only would have been banned on Patreon, but had to be produced completely on the director's dime, since no studio was willing to work on such an obscene project. Hiroshi Harada spent 5 years and his entire life savings producing and animating his masterpiece, Shoujo Tsubaki Chika Gento Gekaiga, or known more popularly in the West simply as Midori, based on ero-guro artist Suehiro Maruo's cult classic manga. published in the US under the title Mr. Arashi's Amazing Freak Show, tells the story of Midori, a young girl who, after becoming an orphan, runs off to join a carnival sideshow. Maruo, notorious for his fixations on the bizarre and grotesque, and apparently eyeball-looking, drew inspiration for Mr. Arashi's Amazing Freak Show from a style of street theater popular in post-war Japan, called kamishibai. Performers would entertain crowds of children by telling stories while cycling through a collection of painted boards. Kamishibai performances were often reflections on the condition of Japanese society after the atrocities of the Second World War. The character Midori, albeit less tragic in origin, is a twist on a popular trope in kamishibai theater. A naive young girl who is sold to a traveling sideshow in order to help pay off her father's gambling debt. Mr. Arashi's Amazing Freak Show has developed a cult following online for its disturbing thematic conceptions and grotesque depictions of animal violence and child abuse. In 2016, it even received a crappy live-action adaptation. Hiroshi Harada got a start in animation in the early 80s. He was credited for key animation in Bosco Daiboken and Fushigi no Koala Blinky, as well as 2 Doraemon movies before he grew jaded of industry practices and disappeared to work on Shoujo Tsubaki. Due to its disturbing content and graphic depictions of sex and violence, Harada was unable to convince any animation studios to sponsor the film. Left with extremely limited manpower, Harada had to get creative with whatever resources were available to him. Animation had to be used sparingly. The limited animation, or lack thereof, is reminiscent of the same style of kamishibai theater that helped inspire the original manga. Characters' mouths may not move when they are speaking, and most of the film is composed of panning hand-painted stills. The best animation is saved for trippy dream sequences or when someone is being turned inside out. Otherwise, Harada contrasts shocking visual metaphor with a bright and bizarre color palette to keep viewers' skin crawling. This effect is further enhanced by the disorienting soundtrack composed by J.A. Caesar, known for his work on Revolutionary Girl Utena, who reimagines the sounds of traditional Japanese folk music as if played from the depths of hell. 5 years and over 5,000 hand-painted cells later, Hiroshi Harada was ready to unveil his film. Shoujo Tsubaki premiered in 1992 in a tent at the Mitake Jinja Shinto Shrine campgrounds in Tokyo. Harada was extremely particular about the presentation of his film, insisting that the venue be made up to look like a freak show. In order to even get to the venue, moviegoers had to follow cryptic signs and navigate their way through a dark maze. Acrobats and circus performers were often a part of the spectacle. In 1999, the original film was sent overseas to be screened, but upon its return back to Japan, the tape was seized and destroyed by customs at the Narita airport. The only remaining copy of Shoujo Tsubaki was a censored version. Approximately 6 minutes of animation were lost. It upsets me to see creators face prosecution for making their art. Patreon has the ability to support anyone with a vision and an internet connection, but instead they've chosen to undercut adult creators who already have enough difficulty making their art as it is. Nobody was willing to help Hiroshi Harada. He spent 5 years and his life savings crafting Shoujo Tsubaki, only to have whole minutes of animation destroyed. But despite it all, Shoujo Tsubaki became a cult hit. People came long and far to see the film in person, and to this day there are still people online arguing about the ending. Shoujo Tsubaki is not a film for everyone. The film's thematic exploration of sexual abuse and hazing is, if anything, disturbing, and the couple gory scenes may be too horrific for certain viewers. Midori, left with nothing, runs off to join the freak show, where she endures the humiliation and cruelty of her fellow carnies, until a charismatic magician sweeps in and steals the show. Midori falls in love with the dwarf magician, and he convinces her to run away with him to the city. But tragedy strikes before she can finally escape her misery. Over and over, we must bear witness as our beautiful young heroine finds hope, only to have it viciously torn away. It is in these moments we are offered a brief glimpse into the mind of Midori, as the art style melts into a girly dreamscape. Shoujo Tsubaki may be offensive, but it has the right to exist as art. Hiroshi Harada offers interesting commentary on the cruelty of humans and social structures that perpetrate it. Anyone who has ever experienced bullying or has been taken advantage of can relate to Midori. Despite the terrible things done to her by the carnies, Midori understands that she cannot live alone and continues to search for a source of hope. The world has been cruel to the entire cast of Shoujo Tsubaki, many of whom are disabled or disfigured with nowhere else to go. Midori, innocent and defenseless, becomes an easy target for the wickedness brewing in their hearts. She finds an escape in her relationship with the dwarf and their plans to escape to the city. However, he is no better than the rest for denying Midori control over her own future out of selfish desire. If you care about the progress of artistic expression, then it is in your best interest to support your favorite artist and to stand up for their rights. As long as someone stands to benefit, risque content will continue to be persecuted and demonetized online. If this video got you thinking about the future of expression on the internet, please share it around as much as you can. For updates and the occasional dank meme, follow me on Twitter at _I'mSuperCute. Thanks for watching. Ciao!